Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the DM's Guild character class, Splicer Class, designed by Justin Tholl for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my Platinum patrons, Andrew, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Chris, Alberto, and Manuel, and Gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Strumming Grenade, Pretty Boy, Nima, Marcos, Dead Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, AK, Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, and Jerome. Thank you all very much for your support. Splicer Class is, what it says in the title, a single new character class. Does not feature a cover in the PDF, oddly enough, although there is a cover in the store, which is what you just saw on my review image. So it almost feels like there's some pages missing here. You know, you don't have the page with the legalese, and the author's name is also not anywhere on the PDF. So kind of pro tip or suggestion there, definitely have a cover page on the PDF, and definitely at least have your name on there somewhere, and other little legalese and facts and things in there. The Splicer class is a mix between a wild-shaping druid and a shifter, I think, and it's kind of reminds me of the Final Fantasy characters. Some of them do this, but you can gain new abilities by defeating monsters, which is always a cool concept. I think that's neat. In fact, we, in our current D&D game, we used one of the Unearthed Arcana rules for druid wild shapes, which is you have to gain new shapes to transform into, kind of Animorph style. Basically, you have to either interact with the beast directly with an animal handling check, or you can observe it from a distance with a nature check, and that's how you actually gain new animal shapes. So I thought that was always a neat concept. So I'm on board with the Splicer class, which the concept is that you gain new beast or monstrosity traits, resistances, abilities, armor class. You can get their natural armor, like a whole bunch of different things from monsters. But importantly, it has specific thought out limitations, which is you have only a certain amount of these, and they're called essences, that you can draw from. You have a certain amount of augmentations that you can use based on those essences that you have. You can only augment once per day, so you can't just turn a whole bunch on or off kind of at will. And your body actually transforms and takes some damage whenever you do splice, I guess, transform yourself. And you are limited by the CR rating of similar to the Druid Wild Shape, where you can only go so strong depending on what level you are. You also have to make a similar check, which I just talked about with the Wild Shaping, which was from an Unearthed Arcana for Druids, that you have to make an intelligence check. In this case, it is a DC 13 plus the challenge rating intelligence check from a defeated foe in order to draw that essence out. So it's not a guaranteed thing that as soon as you defeat this monster, you gain their essence. So with all of those limitations in place, I'm generally on board with how this whole concept works. That being said, which I think it's important to balance it out. That being said, it still needs way more clearer rules on what exactly can be drawn from a monster and how exactly can that thing work. I went through all of the beasts and monstrosities of generally from less than CR 10, because as you can see by the table here, it's pretty much as high as you get, which is almost, I mean, you're not getting Tarrasques or Remorazes and that kind of thing. I think the Behir maybe is a CR 11, so maybe you can't quite get the really crazy monstrosities, but you can get pretty dang high. So an example of things that you could gain, if I'm understanding this correctly, you could get an Onkeg's Acid Spray, an Ankylosaurus's Tail Attack, a Basilisk's Petrifying Gaze, a Dark Mantle's 60, and yes, I wrote all these down as I was searching, a Dark Mantle's 60-foot Blind Sight Sense, a Doppelganger's Shape Change, as well as Yuan-Ti's ability to shape change, and a Yuan-Ti's magic resistance, specifically the Yuan-Ti that aren't the pure blood, I believe, because those are humanoid. I think all the ones that are Malisons and the half snakes are all considered monstrosities. Giant spiders, web, the ability to shoot webs as well as their spider climb ability. So it states that you don't get the speed. You can't draw a speed from a monstrosity, but if it's a trait, then you get that. And some of the traits, for example, is spider climb, which lets you like walk on walls and ceilings, or amphibious is a trait, so you could gain the ability to breathe underwater. You could get a Sue Monster's Psychic Crush attack. You could get a Phase Spider's Ethereal Jaunt. You could just hop into the Ethereal realm whenever you wanted, which seems insane. And Umber Hulk's Confusing Gaze. There's just so many abilities, and there's some pretty crazy ones. Like, could you gain a Naga's Rejuvenation? Could you get a Hydra's ability to regrow heads? Like, it starts becoming game-breaking at one point. Now, granted, those are very high, CR creatures, so it wouldn't be until you're a bit higher level, but still. Can you splice multi-attack? And I literally wrote that down in my notes, and the answer is actually yes, because one of the subclasses gives you, as an option, the ability to gain a multi-attack splice. So you could just add a multi-attack. Now, here's the question, for example, which is part of the confusion. The multi-attacks for monsters always say with their specific attacks. So, for example, you can make it a one attack with your bite and one attack with your tail. Or you can make one attack with your bite and two attacks with your claws. Well, does that mean you have to have bites and claws? Now, you do start with certain abilities. It says starting essences, and this is also part of the confusion because you can only have 2 essences in your library, which is the terminology here in terms of the ones you can draw from. But you also start off with, I assume, all of these. I assume this isn't counted towards your limit because some of them are really crappy. The claws, +0 to hit, does 1 slashing damage. The idea is you can, I guess, augment those with different abilities or replace those claws with, maybe more powerful claw attacks as you level up and can gain more augment. So it's a very advanced concept. You're really opening up Pandora's box when you're telling a player, hey, you can gain monster abilities. You need to be this is like monkey paw stuff. You need to be very careful about the wording you're using and how exactly it works. And it gets a little confusing when it comes to the attacks, because at one point it says you lose any proficiencies in weapons and armor while you've got that enhancement. And then when you attack, you have to choose whether to use your natural weapon attack or the enhanced attack, and you do not get any modifiers, just your proficiency. So I'm really confused about, if I were to gain an Ankylosaurus's tail attack and it's listed as a +7 to hit, 46 +4, obviously that's drawing from the NPC, which NPC stat blocks don't look like PC stat blocks. They have all that shit just baked in at a glance. So you would have to do you have to reverse engineer the monster stat block to figure out, okay, what is its proficiency bonus versus what is its modifiers, and then what does the player get? This would have benefited so much from having examples broken down. Like, example, if you want a, I don't know, a baboon's fist or something, here's what it looks like in the stat block, and here's what it would look like for you as part of your essence library, and then when you use it, here's what you get, and then this later ability that says, I think at some point you get to add your modifier or something. Give me some examples, because this is very, very confusing, and I could see where it would go. You can make multiple arguments, and the problem is if you're a player coming to a DM with this cool class idea, and I do think it's cool and interesting and unique, the DM is going to have all these questions and be like, well, wait a minute, how does, and even the players can be like, okay, well, I'm just going to add all my shit to it, and like, well, wait a minute, it says here on this needs to be very, very clear about how this works, because this is very unique and unlike how any other class works. The other interesting balancing factor is that you have no spells available whatsoever. Spellcasting is the one thing that it specifically doesn't list that you can gain. So, for example, you cannot gain, from what I understand, like an Ettercap spells or a Naga spells. Spellcasting is just not a thing you can draw essence from. And you've only got a D8 of hit points. So it's a really interesting modification. You are not a spellcaster, but you've got like a spellcaster's hit dice. And then your attacks are purely... And you'd have to spend some of those augments and essence libraries on attacks if you want to have those attacks. Otherwise, you're doing random shit like, maybe a Petrifying Gaze or web attacks or something like utility-based, which could be really interesting too. A big part of this, however, is the DM, is what kind of monsters you're facing, because you can only gain abilities from monsters that you face. So the DM is ultimately in control, which is, again, why I'm on board with this, because a DM can look at this and say, like, well, I'm just never going to throw basilisks or cockatrices at you because I don't want you to have the ability to petrify fucking everything that you see or attack. And that's something that a DM can choose. Unfortunately, what the level ups do with this class is either ease these restrictions that I listed at the very beginning, or simply hand over the ability to choose from a list of really great, powerful, useful abilities. In other words, you don't have to defeat the creature first. At some level, and it even says you have acquired enough knowledge to acquire an essence. Don't use acquire in the same sentence. From your own experience, you may choose one of the following essences. It's like, I guess you've faced an owlbear at some point, or a giant shark, or a blaze deadly leap. Like, you just gain one of those abilities. But that spits in the face of what you just established, which is you have to defeat those monsters in order to gain those essences. So that's a big bummer to me, because I enjoyed that concept. That was a major restriction that the class had, and that was like a covenant you made between the DM in terms of the DM allowing this. Is like, well, the DM's ultimately in control of which monsters you're going to see and which abilities you get. And sometimes it might be cool for the DM to be like, all right, I'm going to have you face some giant spiders, and the player can be like, oh, cool, I can get a web ability. That's not game breaking in any way, but it's kind of a cool thing you can gain, versus something that might be like an Umber Hulk's gaze, or a fucking Medusa's petrifying gaze, or something along those lines, or shape-changing abilities. Like, all that can be really nuts. So I don't like the idea that you level up and simply can gain from a laundry list of new abilities. That feels like it's just going against the whole spirit of the thing. At level 7, you no longer have to defeat a creature. You can actually do it during combat. However, there's some kind of mistake here, because it says you can do it during combat, but then it says the time takes a minute, and a combat round is 6 seconds. So there's some kind of misinterpretation there, because it says you can do it as a bonus action during combat. You still have to make the roll and everything, but you could do it in the middle of combat. But first of all, why does that do you any good? Because it takes you a long rest to even apply the thing to begin with. And second of all, a minute is obviously, anything that takes a minute means it's not for combat, is what that means, because that would be 10 rounds of you standing there doing that thing. So there's something got lost in translation. It's not supposed to be either a minute, or something is not supposed to work that way. But I don't even understand why you would necessarily need to do that in combat. Like, it just doesn't. If you want to change it to the rules that the Druid has in Unearthed Arcana, where you can observe a creature from a distance, or do it in stealth or something, to where you don't have to even fight the creature. Because if you're already in combat, you're probably going to defeat the creature anyway, and then you can just make the check. And then at 10th level, it says you're no longer limited to enhancing once per day. So again, it's just easing up on those restrictions, whereas I think those restrictions were really important for balancing the class. So, and at level 20, you basically become like a miniature Tarask, which, whatever. I never comment on level 20 stuff, because it's batshit crazy anyway. The subclasses, unfortunately, are also not very impressive. One of them just does the same thing. It just gives you a bunch of new, hey, you gain a list of new monstrous abilities that you can add, with the assumption that you become just more grotesque. But I mean, it's just like you gain Manticore, the tail spikes, you gain multi-attacks. It's just not. It's the same thing the class would be doing anyway. I don't feel like the subclass does anything different. The Augmenter, I'm going to put a full stop on. If I took a look at this subclass, there is no way I would let you play this, because at 3rd level you get at-will invisibility. It doesn't say it once per day or anything like that. It's just, as an action, you can turn invisible. What? And then at 9th level, you gain wings and gain a flying speed of 60 feet. So just at-will flight of 60 feet. Whereas I believe specifically you cannot draw flight speed from creatures normally unless they have a trait that says, you gain limited flight or whatever. Which I don't think any of them do. A lot of them have like the extra leaps or spider climbs, but I don't recall seeing any that are give you flight without it just being part of their stat block. But that one is just straight bullshit. And the fifth level ability is bizarre. You can throw one of your essences that you have to ostensibly a party member, and then they can gain some effect from it, but then you lose it. So it becomes like a consumable buff that you can throw, which is very, very bizarre thematically, but at least becomes something different, whereas the others are just insanely powerful abilities. The third one is the most different and at least offers something unique, where you can create this clay pet, basically, and then the idea is you can enhance that thing with the same enhancements that you're gathering, so you're kind of building up this other creature, and presumably over enough time you could, I think, enhance them with different enhancements than what you have. Augment. I don't recall there being a restriction about having to have those in your library even while the augment is active. I think that's just to place that augment in the thing. So that's at least kind of interesting. You could create a potential pet of different kind of traits and create this bizarre monster. So that's kind of cool. Bizarrely enough, that's the subclass that at 5th level gains multi-attack just as a class, which feels very, very weird. So I'm not on board, and I liked the initial concept, and I thought it was well thought out with the abilities and giving the limitations and having to make a skill check to even gain. You're having to fight the monster and then make a skill check to gain the essence. All of that I thought was very well thought out, but I really needed either examples of how this works, and ideally just give me a list of which traits are available, frankly, because yes, there's a lot of monsters out there. You're not going to be able to cover everything at the time of this thing is released, but give me examples of abilities that are allowed and do a good laundry list of abilities, and then specifically list things that are not allowed and give a bunch of those abilities. And then that gives me an idea of what the Splicer could actually use or not use. And please give me examples of specifically how attacks work, because I'm still confused about what modifiers to use or anything like that. It sounds like you'd be pretty well in line with like a regular fighter for most of these until you get up to something like an Ankylosaurus tail that deals, a 4d6. But that is one of your augments, and how often are you going to face an Ankylosaurus too? That's the thing. Like, the DM always has control until you get to some of these level ups, and then you just gain like a woolly mammoth's a gore attack. So despite the DM's best efforts to give you only certain monsters, and that might be cool as a reward later on to give them that monster, instead of being like, oh man, at 14th level I'm just gonna have this woolly mammoth ability. Like that doesn't feel right. And that is the class. So let's go over our pros and cons for the Splicer class. Pros: adding monster attacks and traits is a neat idea. I think it's a really cool concept. I don't know if there's enough here to actually warrant it being its own class. I think it almost might have worked better as a druid subclass, something that built off of wild shape, and instead of being able to transform, you instead permanently modify your own body. I think that might have been a better idea, because there's not enough here to warrant its own class in terms of the abilities. It's just gaining more of that one concept, more abilities or something. But I think it is a really cool concept, and I do like that. I always like that character class and like the Final Fantasy, like the Beast guys. And pros: essences can be powerful, but include several important limitations. I do think, even though the class later kind of betrays those limitations, I think it's important that you have to face the monsters, defeat the monsters, and they have like a CR limit. Like, all those things are in place to at least give the DM some breathing room. Cons: as I just mentioned, leveling up either eases essence limitations or simply adds new ones, bypassing the primary class feature. I'm not a fan of how that works at all. And cons: there's lots of confusion over what abilities can be gained and which modifiers and proficiencies to use or not use. This is a hugely unique, cool, new concept, and it really needs to have very, very clear, important rules about how this works. And those rules would have benefited greatly from a list of things that can be used and not used, as well as examples of how to draw. Here's Johnny Splicer just defeated, some creature, and then here are the abilities. If you're successful, these are the abilities that Johnny can gain, and then here's how it works when they long rest. They can apply one of these. Like, literally walk me through everything, which I realize is not normally a part of normal player classes, but this one I think really requires it. Final verdict: gaining monster abilities from defeated foes is a neat concept, but the Splicer class needs clearer rules and may have been better suited as a druid subclass. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.